Mayors have been working on this for a generation. I mean, dating back to Bud and before Bud. Why haven't we solved it? And are there mistakes that we made? Are there things we should have done that we didn't? Things we should not have done that we did?
Well, no doubt there are all the above. No doubt there are mistakes. No doubt there are things we should have done that we didn't, or things that we did do that weren't all that effective. I think it's easy for any of us to look critically at this issue and say, my God, they spent $47 million on Bud Clark Commons, and we still have exactly the same number on the streets tonight as we did before they built Bud Clark Commons. Did it do any good? Well, the answer is yes. There are a whole lot of people who got off the street, got cleaned up, and got started towards treatment and recovery and participating again in society because they got to get under that roof. Does that mean the total number has dropped? No. There's a lot of individual success being created by good people, whether it's volunteers at the Salvation Army or at Blanchet House, or professionals at Central City Concern, or folks in the Housing Bureau or PDC who built projects. A lot of good work being done. But I think if you remember again that this is a tank in which, you know, people are pouring in through several faucets and they're being siphoned off through several outlets.
In 2003, you used City Hall as a prime example of cracking down on illegal campers, illegal loiterers, saying it was not an issue of homelessness, it was an issue of lawlessness. I think there's still a lot of confusion out there about how and when the city enforces those kinds of rules. Can you explain how you want law enforcement to be making the distinction about what's okay and what's not okay, when it's allowed, when it's not allowed?
Well, there's some people in the police bureau who are passionate and articulate about this. I think you've talked to some of them, Rick DeLand, Bob Day, who I think have really crystallized the police bureau's approach, which is we are here to make sure that the streets and sidewalks of the city can be peacefully enjoyed by everybody. And therefore, we'll be concerned about behavior. And we're going to be on foot on those streets like we were last summer on Hawthorne and like we are every day in lots of the central city, building a relationship with those people. The rabid debate over the sit-lie ordinance was an ideological fight. We're much less interested in having that fight now. What we are interested in is what will work to change the culture and the livability of a street like Hawthorne or a district like the Central East Side. When we know some things that work, getting the officers out there on the street, building a relationship with the property owners and with the homeless folks that live in that neighborhood is one thing. And then you know, having that neighborhood organize itself to keep things clean and safe like we've done downtown. I personally believe, by the way, that we need to have more business improvement districts like we have with the Clean and Safe District downtown, where property owners assess themselves to provide an enhanced level of services. Come on, it's an urban environment. There are going to be more issues. There's going to be more trash and problems to address than there would be out in some, you know, windswept suburb. So we know that neighborhood community organizing, whether it's done by business people that own downtown buildings or neighborhood residents along a Hawthorne or an Alberta Street, we know that works. We know that community policing works. And we know that the housing system works for getting people who are ready to get off the street. I think the things that really aren't working are the mental health system in this state is dysfunctional, has been for a long time, and we have a lot of people who are on the street who are suffering from mental illness. And we have some very powerful addictive drugs out there, including some new varieties of heroin that are very, very inexpensive and very available, and make it really hard for people to get off of an addiction.
Is Sit-Lie dead at this point?
As far as I'm concerned.
How does the business community feel about that?
I don't hear a lot of people that want to go fight that pitched battle over a symbolic issue. I think maybe everyone's sophistication of understanding has improved a little bit, and we know that all that does is change the legalities of when people get moved from point A to point B.
I hear from readers all the time who want to know, why don't we just arrest them all? Why don't we just arrest them all? Why don't we just sweep up all the camps, any place where you might see them? Why don't we forbid people from panhandling?
Right.
Tell me why that doesn't work.
Well, practical reason why that doesn't work is we don't have enough jail beds to keep all those folks. So if we wanted to quote unquote crack down and start arresting people for the most minor of offenses on the streets and sidewalks of our city, we would take them to the Multnomah County Jail and they would be released, because there are people who have committed more serious crimes occupying the cells in that jail. And judges and others in the criminal justice system would basically say, get out of here, we've got serious things to deal with, and this isn't one of them.
Seattle already has several large tent cities that they use as essentially emergency rest areas. And the mayor there just this winter announced plans for 3 more. Would tent cities make sense in Portland?
I think in a limited way, that's an option that has some merit. I mean, the Right to Dream 2 rest area is an example of a group of people who started out essentially squatting on a piece of land and then organized themselves as a real community, and who have provided, at little or no public expense, a safe option for people that were living outside. And therefore, the Right to Dream 2 group has gotten a lot of help and encouragement from City Hall, even if we haven't quite yet found the next place where that community ought to locate, because the location that they're in now is not a permanent or is not a practicable long-term location. But I think that, and we saw years ago with Dignity Village, which is still there, you know, that's a useful model for some people. I'm not sure if we have either the places or the affection for the tent city model here that Mayor Murray seems to have in Seattle. So it's really hard to find places where camping is okay. There are lots of places where it's unfortunate, and there are places where it's tolerated, but there are not very many places where you'd say it was welcomed.
I've heard skepticism from the development community, not surprisingly, that inclusionary zoning would lead to a major influx of new affordable units in Portland. What would it do?
I think it's another case where, you know, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's not correct, that's wrong. And inclusionary zoning in and of itself is not going to solve the problem, and people need to lower their expectations. Again, it's something that I think all 5 of us on this city council want. We want that tool from the legislature, and if we're given that tool, we'll use it. But it's not going to solve. It's going to help. It's going to be one more tool in the kit. But anybody who thinks that that's the arrival of housing nirvana is, I believe, wrong. And in fact, the current version of the bill, as I understand it, doesn't even really address multifamily housing, but addresses single-family subdivisions. Well, that's exactly the least helpful version of the bill. Where inclusionary zoning will make some sense in Portland and do some good in Portland is in large multifamily projects. We're seeing very few single-family subdivisions, and we're almost out of land for those, and so we will see very few of them.
Do you agree with the notion that we need some sort of new local revenue source?
Yes. I don't know what it is, and we have another local funding problem we need to address first, and that's transportation, because that's an egregious, long-standing problem, and it's a basic responsibility of city government. And there's no point in confusing people by starting on a housing funding crusade before we address how we maintain the streets that we already own and that are crumbling under our feet and under our tires. But I think we do need a local revenue source for housing.
But from your perspective, streets need to come first.
I think they have to. I'm pretty agnostic about what revenue source we use to pay for this shared responsibility, as long as it's fair and again doesn't do great economic harm to people. I don't care a lot whether it's a vehicle registration fee or a sales tax or a tax on lattes, as long as it would actually pave the streets. And I have pretty much the same attitude about the housing issue.
How about when it comes to housing, something like an impact fee or a demolition fee?
I'm interested in those.
This is a personal question, but it's one I'm asking everybody I interview. Do you give to panhandlers?
No, unless it's a food coupon. But I maniacally patronize street roots vendors. Because there's an example of people who are earning money in a legitimate venture where people who are homeless or just leaving homelessness have real opportunity.
Why not give cash?
Because most panhandlers are going to use those monies for drugs.
Do you think Portland is a magnet for homeless people?
I think that's a smaller problem. Most of the people who are homeless in Oregon are from Oregon. No one is sleeping under the Ross Island Bridge under a tarp tonight in the dirt or in the mud, because Portland's just a really fun and easy place to be homeless. This is a national problem. Every big city, you've quoted the numbers, every big city has a huge homeless population. It's a national problem that stems from societal factors like the availability of drugs and the ineffectiveness of a mental health system and the decline of wages for non-college educated workers. All those big national factors. But one of the reasons I'm energized about this job is I and a lot of mayors believe that those are big, terrible national problems, and we actually can make a difference at the local level, whether you're talking about income inequality or the ability to actually tackle a problem like veterans homelessness. I believe that we in Portland can make a difference, but the solutions have to be crafted here with an eye on what's worked in some other city.
What does it look like if it works? 5 years from now, when we come back to write about this version of a plan, what yardstick should we use to gauge success?
I think one will be the norm that veterans will not be homeless. We won't see that veterans homelessness that we've seen ever since the Vietnam War. Secondly, that we will have more shelter capacity, because for those that are ready to get off the street tonight, it's unconscionable that we don't have a place to send them. And then third, that you'll see the city and the county and the housing authority and these other partners working smart with perhaps more money than today, but certainly working smart with the money we have and really tracking results.
Through this process of a home for everything, what have you learned that has surprised you or changed how you view this issue?
Well, not necessarily just through this process, but this process has confirmed it, and that is that homelessness is not a single strand. There are these other strands of mental health and addiction and dysfunction in the lives of kids that are intertwined with the fact that there's a dirty, unkempt guy under a tarp under that bridge. There's a story for each of those people, and an awful lot of those stories involve abuse, sexual predators, drugs, alcohol, and the inability to get a job after getting that criminal record. So I think my understanding of homelessness has become more nuanced the more I've learned about those issues. The problem is big and complex, but I do think we are making progress. I do believe we will make a lot more, and we'll make it because we take a clear-eyed look at all those factors. We go after each one of them in an effective way, test if it's effective or not, And you know, this approach, this new emphasis on really measuring progress, having dashboards. It's not just a fad in government. It's an effort to try to make government more businesslike and more accountable.